In other words, he has all the demons in him, the Irish demons.
Lee Marvin didn't just play the heavy. He chewed up phonies and spit them out. Everyone bought the act that Frank Sinatra was the top dog, the ultimate Hollywood alpha. But it took Marvin exactly one sentence to turn the chairman of the board into a scared kid looking for an exit. He went on record saying a brick wall gave a better performance than Charles Bronson. And Robert Mitchum? His arrogance pushed Marvin so far, he broke the absolute #1 rule of the trade. This isn't just a rivalry. This is Lee Marvin's Blacklist. 5 cinema icons who turned out to be yellow when the cameras stopped rolling. You think you know these legends? Think again. At the top of the hate list sits John Wayne. To the public, he was American heroism wrapped in a cowboy hat. To Lee Marvin, he was the ultimate fraud who used Hollywood strings to stay out of uniform. It started on the set of The Comancheros in 1961. Wayne was puffing his chest for reporters, bragging about capturing the American fighting spirit. Marvin cut him off cold, cameras rolling. "You didn't serve, John. Don't talk like you were there." The room went dead silent. Here's the reality. Marvin served in the Pacific. He wasn't peeling potatoes behind the lines. He was a scout sniper in the 4th Marine Division. He went through hell at the Battle of Saipan, took a bullet that severed his sciatic nerve, and earned a Purple Heart. While Marvin was watching his squad get wiped out on a beach, Wayne was safe in Hollywood, clinging to a 3A draft deferment and playing dress-up for the cameras. Wayne walked off, humiliated, but he tried to claw back his authority. Later, Wayne tried to show Marvin the heroic way to hold a rifle. Marvin fired back, loud enough for the whole crew to hear. "I learned to hold this at Saipan when people were shooting back." "Where'd you learn? The studio lot?" Wayne couldn't even look him in the eye for the rest of the day. Marvin had scars. Wayne just had choreography. By 1965, it got ugly. Wayne tried to get Marvin fired from a major Western, telling the suits that Marvin didn't represent American values. Rich coming from a draft dodger. Marvin's response was brutal. He acts the patriot, but lives like a coward. For Marvin, Wayne's flag-waving wasn't acting. It was a spit in the face to every grunt who died in the mud. Marvin paid the price in blood. Wayne did it for box office receipts. Even when Wayne died in 1979, Marvin didn't soften up. A reporter asked for a tribute. Marvin's answer was cold as ice. "I honor soldiers. He just played one." Next up, Frank Sinatra. To the world, he was the voice. To Lee Marvin, he was just a studio gangster who treated working men like dirt. Marvin had zero patience for Hollywood royalty. He knew Frank's tough guy act relied on his mob connections, whereas Marvin's toughness came from killing men in the Pacific with his bare hands. It wasn't just the fame, it was the disrespect. Sinatra would show up hours late, barking orders, treating the crew like hired help. He refused to rehearse, forcing seasoned actors to stand around waiting for the chairman to finish his drink. One day, Sinatra strolled onto the set like he owned the studio while the crew scrambled to keep him happy. Marvin had seen enough. He walked right up to Frank and cut the music. "You think the world owes you a living just because you showed up?" Sinatra, never one to back down, snapped back. "At least I don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp." That was the spark. But the explosion happened later at a Beverly Hills bar. Sinatra was holding court with his Rat Pack, laughing loud, acting the tough guy. Marvin slammed his drink down. He marched over to the table, looked Sinatra dead in the eye, and said what nobody else in Hollywood had the guts to say. "You talk a big game, Frank, but when the fists start flying, you always send someone else to do the heavy work." Marvin knew Frank's power ended where his bodyguards began. He was calling out the man behind the tuxedo, and for once, Sinatra had nowhere to hide. The bar went dead silent. Sinatra's boys stepped in before it got physical, but the message was delivered. It climaxed with the Dirty Dozen. Sinatra was supposed to star, but he bailed last minute. The official excuse was scheduling conflicts. Marvin called it what it was: ego. He told everyone off the record. He didn't walk because he was busy. He walked because he couldn't handle being part of a team instead of the main attraction. To Marvin, acting was a job. You clock in, you work hard, you shut up. Sinatra wanted a coronation, And Marvin didn't bow to anyone. Sinatra was a headache, but Charles Bronson was something worse, a vacuum. To Lee Marvin, Bronson wasn't mysterious. He was empty, a man who looked like steel but felt like dead air. Marvin was a live wire, loud, joking, building camaraderie in the trenches. Bronson was radio silence. On the set of The Dirty Dozen, the contrast was brutal. Marvin tried to rally the troops. Bronson stood alone, icing everyone out. He didn't speak. He didn't connect. He just took up space. One afternoon, Marvin finally cracked. He leaned over to a co-star, loud enough for Bronson to hear, "It's like working with a brick wall, except the wall has more personality." The crew tried to laugh, but the tension was thick. Marvin viewed acting like combat. You need to trust the guy in the foxhole with you. You need a reaction. Bronson gave him nothing. No spark, no energy, just a blank stare. Marvin summed it up later with zero hesitation. "Bronson is great in a scrap, but if I'm going to war, give me a guy who can actually hold a conversation." It wasn't just a clash of styles. To Marvin, Bronson's refusal to engage wasn't cool. It was selfish. And in Marvin's book, you don't leave your partner hanging. Robert Mitchum. Hollywood called him a legend. Lee Marvin called him a waste of space. If anyone could get under Marvin's skin, it was Mitchum. Mitchum treated a movie set like his personal playground. Marvin believed in discipline. Mitchum believed in doing as little as possible. The explosion happened on a night shoot in the early 60 seconds. Mitchum rolled onto the set, reeking of bourbon, eyes half shut. He clearly hadn't cracked the script. Marvin stood there, fuming, watching this genius blow 3 lines in a row. Marvin snapped. He stepped up and barked, "You planning to act today, or are you gonna sleep through the damn picture?" Mitchum didn't even blink. He just gave that sleepy grin and said, "Relax, kid. The camera loves me either way." That smirk lit Marvin's fuse. What hurt wasn't the arrogance, it was that Mitchum was right. Mitchum could roll out of bed, hungover, and still look cooler than anyone else. For a grinder like Marvin, that was the ultimate disrespect. Later, at a party, Marvin cornered him again. "Your whole career looks like you're sleepwalking." Mitchum didn't raise his voice. He just drawled, "Better than barking every line like you're still wearing army boots." The air in the room got heavy. It was a war between two worlds. Marvin's brutal discipline versus Mitchum's effortless talent. Marvin couldn't respect a man who flushed his gift down the toilet. From that night on, the bridge was burned. Marvin hated lazy actors, but he hated fake kings even more. Enter Yul Brynner, the self-appointed monarch of Hollywood. Marvin was a meat and potatoes man. He didn't play politics. Brynner was pure arrogance. He treated the set of The Magnificent Seven like his royal court. It started with the script. Brynner demanded rewrites, stealing lines to make sure he looked like the toughest guy in the room, but the breaking point was the lighting. Brynner was obsessed. He would halt production for hours, forcing the crew to adjust the spotlights until they caught the perfect gleam on his famous bald head. Marvin sat in the dust, waiting for His Majesty to admire his own reflection. Finally, he snapped. He walked over and barked, loud enough to stop traffic. "You ain't the king around here. You're just a guy with a massive ego and a bald head." The crew froze. Nobody spoke to Brynner like that. To Marvin, this wasn't acting. It was cheap vanity. It was the opposite of the job. Brynner wrote Marvin off as a brute, but Marvin had the final say. He told the studios he'd rather quit the business than share a frame with that narcissistic peacock again. To Lee Marvin, these men weren't just rivals. They were a diagnosis. They represented the rot at the core of the business, the lies, the laziness, and the unchecked egos. While they played tough guys for the lens, Marvin was the genuine article. There were no apologies. No hatchets were buried. He checked out undefeated, proving one final point. In a town built on smoke and mirrors, a soldier's honor is worth more than all the box office gold in the world.